Australia have hit back in Sydney to deny the Lions a series whitewash in what has been a memorable tour for the tourists who win the series. I'm Adam Gaston. I'm with my co-host Dom Leach here today, where we wrap up the Lions chat for 2025. Welcome back to the Ruck and Roll Show. Here is episode 3 of season 3. Well, Dom, for 2025, that's the Lions series all done. What's the overwhelming thoughts? I haven't seen that third test.
I think that if you're a Lion going on that tour, I think you've got to be happy with obviously the series win being the main thing. It's a bit unfortunate they couldn't see it out and claim a 3-0 victory. But, sometimes you got to chuck a dog a bone and give them a bit of a sympathy win. Sometimes I'm not saying it is that, but no, it was an incredible tour. To say the least, and as I say, I think the Lions can definitely be proud of what they've achieved, and how they've grown as a group, and hopefully, because I think there's quite a young cohort in that Lions squad. Hopefully, in 4 years' time, you'll see a lot of the same faces coming back, and there should be a lot more cohesion coming into 2029 in New Zealand.
Yeah, you speak about that younger cohort. That's something we're definitely going to come on to later when we talk about the legacy of the Lions. You speak about perhaps throwing the dog bone. I don't think the Australians will think we were throwing them any bones there. I've seen some shouts by certain sectors of the media, I think in Australia, which are calling it a bit of a robbed series, considering the sort of the Jack Morgan clear out and now the third test win for Australia. What do you sort of make of the game? I mean, obviously you had like big players coming back in for the Wallabies. We sort of spoke briefly, Luke, who unfortunately not able to make it with us today. We'll make sure to put his thoughts in for the third test at the end of the episode. But we've talked about the impact of Nick White coming in on his last appearance for the Wallabies. How great was he, by the way? Like, how do you
Yeah,
assess his performance?
I think if there's a game that you want to go out on as your last one for your country, one, to do it against the Lions is incredible. Two, to have that performance for 60 minutes, I think just tops it all off. Like, he's 100 plus cap player for Australia. Um, he's been one of the biggest characters in world rugby. The mustache itself just speaks absolute volumes for him. When you've got that coming onto the pitch, you just know you're in. If you're the opposition nine, you're in for a day for it. But no, I think I mentioned last episode that I think the Lions needed to win this final game in order for the media to kind of not come back at them and be like, well, it was all if it had been a different outcome in the last test, then it would have been because of the Jack Morgan clear out, it would have been a completely different story. We've been a bit robbed, and so I understand the media outlets kind of saying that, but I think had the decision gone the other way in the second test and the Jack Morgan clear out had have been a penalty, I don't think you would have had the performance that the Lions put in again in Sydney, because I'm pretty sure that the lads will have been out on the drink. They'll have been getting absolutely hammered most nights. Even if you're in the Test 23 squad, you're going to be having a beer here and there. So I think that probably did weigh into the result a lot. But at the end of the day, I mean, I said it in last episode as well. I can't see any way that this game is going to be won by Australia. And fair play to them, they've absolutely had my pants down and proved me wrong, because they came out fighting, and it was an incredible display. And I think it really shows what Australia are capable of going forward.
Yeah, no, you definitely speak about it, and that's something that's going to be absolutely key for them going forward. Without Joe Smith, of course, they're not going to have Joe Smith. I think is he leaving after? I think that's maybe his last. Is that last game? Was it, or is it the rugby
Um,
championship? Certainly, he's not staying on until 2027. With Kiss is taking over for the World
yeah,
Cup in 2 years' time. But yeah, you speak about how tight the media outlets there. I think the overall score across the three tests was 69-68 to the Lions.
68. Yeah, so I
So
saw
it
that
was
stat
like
as
one
well.
point in it, but I think you're
Yeah.
right there. I think if the Lions hadn't, even though that Andy Farrell wouldn't have won it, like he would have wanted that test win in the final test, and he would have drilled that into the boys. You still can, like at that level of sport, when you're playing for the Lions, if you even drop like 1 or 2%, I think Dan Bigger said it on commentary on Sky, that that is just like a huge drop off, even at that sort of low level, 1 or 2%, sort of less clued in, less edge about them. And I think Australia had that edge and just absolute abundance. I think Dylan Peach on the wing, I think he really brought a lot of
Yeah.
energy as well. He brought like a bit of, like, you could just see he was fired up and he was firing other boys up for it. Will Skilton was getting in amongst it, just being an
Yeah.
absolute pest. It was like little and large, like him and Nick White and Will Skilton. Honestly, they were just seemed to be terrorizing the Lions, both
Yeah.
through their rugby, through the physicality and the accuracy, but also through the mind games and sort of like keeping sort of themselves inside the line. And you've seen the Lions blow up a few times. But in terms of going through the game, obviously had that first half where they scored early. Obviously the conditions were awful. What did you sort of make of the way that Australia managed the conditions and their accuracy in comparison to the Lions?
I think again, last episode I mentioned that part of Lions tours is that you have a home advantage, and so when you've got players who are playing in those conditions, quite torrential, they're used to it. So I think they've got an essence of knowing what to expect out of it. So, and yeah, everybody talks about how rainy Britain is and stuff, but I don't think those levels of rain have ever kind of jaded a game in the UK before. So it was probably unfamiliar territory for the Lions. I will say that. But I think I just want to mention a big factor that I think and Luke will probably completely disagree with me, but the fact that Itoje went off so early probably really didn't help matters for the Lions. I know that they got that early score, but in that first half, once he went off, they just kind of seemed a bit lost, and it was a bit bizarre for me. I think that Sheehan got given the captaincy rather than Tadhg, kind of taken over the armband and the
Yeah,
decision
that was.
making. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I found that a little bit strange. That I know Dan Sheehan's sort of someone that's always sort of comes up with the goods, but I think you sort of saw it with the how he could almost, like Dan Sheehan, you could see him looking at the referee on a couple of the decisions that he made, and he was almost looking at the referee like he couldn't believe what he was saying. I
Mm.
think just the way he was looking at him, it just didn't come across well. If you're the referee in that situation and the Lions captain's looking at you in that way, it's sort of something that I picked up on. It's not setting out a great relationship for the sort of the rest of the game. Did eventually go to burn, but I think you're right. Itoje, losing Itoje is going to lose you. I think also that if you speak about something the line out as well, I'm not sure what you thought about the set piece. I think obviously you'd be the forward amongst us. I'd be back, so you'd be able to tell us a little bit more about that. But I think the line out and the sort of scrum sort of wasn't as strong this week than compared to last week for the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying this a lot, and I'm going to draw back on what we said last week for in the last episode, and that is that the referee name has just escaped me, but
Amish
he's
Kelly.
one. Amish Kelly, that's the one. Yeah, he's one of those referees who will just at the scrum. He's very tight on it, and Luke mentioned as well how Andrew Porter's one of those players who he'll have his hips square, which is legal, but then his body will be angled in, which is again completely legal, but it's very fine margins. You've got to be able to have your hips completely square, looking like you're legal. But there was a couple of times he was just completely tilted outwards, or sorry, inwards. So he was being blown up quite a few times for that. I don't think Dan Sheehan had his best game. Ball in hand, he was still quite good, but yeah, the lineouts just didn't seem to be clicking. And I think, like I say, once Itoje went off, that kind of solidity in the lineup kind of went. Jack Ryan, I think he is a good player, but he's not got that presence in a lineout that someone like Itoje or Byrne does. And I think it's very difficult if you're a one man in a lineout trying to make the calls and everybody else is a bit like shying away. You've got to have a couple of characters to kind of be like this is the call, here we go, let's smash into them. So I think that will have definitely played into Australia's hands.
Yeah, well, I think you speak about the line out in terms of the players that they had on after Itoje went off, and you had Chessum in there, and Chessum's obviously a well-renowned sort of line out operator, but I think it was maybe just the lack of familiarity where you had I guess you had who was it? It was Chesson and Ryan, and then obviously Ryan went off injured sort of early on in the second half, and then we could sort of, I think that sort of unfamiliarity and the sort of the chopping and changing certainly definitely didn't help matters, and then Kelleher going on and off, and then it was just, I think it was that whole sort of sort of just the roll and change that was going on.
Yeah.
But you move to that second half, and then just the absolute unthinkable happens. I mean, we know it was rainy, but the game gets called off after that James Ryan injury. Really, he was up and walking at the end, so thankfully it's good to see that. But obviously we had a lightning strike 10 kilometers away from the stadium. Like, you think of the third test of the Lions series in Sydney, like you wouldn't have thought it would happen. So obviously play was disrupted for 40 minutes, but it didn't really seem to change the flow at all. I don't know what you sort of thought in terms of what came out after that, but sort of seemed like Wallabies just came out and just did what they did before the interview. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of, because I kind of retuned back in. I didn't see the start of the first half, so I missed the missed where the storm kind of came in. But when I tuned back in and when I saw the break was happening, I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity for the Lions to actually get back into this game, because it's almost like a second half, a second half time. You've got time to kind of regather. The first 10 minutes isn't going well. You've got time to sit down with your players and go, right, we've lost two second rows. This is how we need to deal with it. And kind of, I think it would have been a great opportunity for the forwards coaches to just kind of lay the law. This is what's happening. These are your roles. Get back out there and actually just fight. But it didn't seem to happen. Like, I think what didn't help, obviously, is that the Wallabies were just flying on all cylinders. You know, from minute 1 to minute 50 to the break to then minute 80, they were just absolutely gunning for it. And it was an incredible performance. And as I said before, it's really positive signs of things to come for the Wallabies. But yeah, it was disappointing to see. It was a really tough watch. I don't know about you, but I thought it was just, yeah, it was
Yeah,
hard to watch.
it was gonna be that sort of game as well. When you sort of look at the weather conditions, it was never gonna be a sort of free flowing running game. Although even despite the weather being the way it was, I think like the Wallabies' accuracy was actually really, really impressive in their kicking. Just, I think they managed it superbly. You look at Nick White, you look at Tom Wright at fullback, and even I think Ben Donaldson when he came on for Michael Lina, or no, not Michael Lina, I keep saying that, that's his dad, Tom Lina, was absolutely superb. Like, just across the back line, they really, really managed the game well. But yeah, you speak about them coming out after that break, but I think Andy Farrell probably already laid down the law from half time, I think is what was being said. And from what I could see from the changing room, I don't think there was much sort of conversations going on. Like, I think they were all just sort of like, right, I've already told you what I want from you, just chill out for a bit and collect your thoughts, and we go out again. You could sort of see that. I think Tag Furlong was nearly going for a kip or something like that. Did you see that? Him and Bundyaki and Gibson Park and all on the beanbags. I couldn't really
Yeah,
believe what I was saying.
they clearly were very relaxed about the final test. And, you know, when you're 2-0 up and you've got one game to go, you know, you've already won the series, so you're going to be a bit more relaxed. But yeah, I think there was just so many factors in the game that, you know, just kind of really swayed in Australia's favour. One thing I will pick up on is Tupou, the title prop. I thought he had an outstanding game,
Fantastic.
because the fact that obviously, I guess they knew that they were going to stick with Porter in that loose, and then to kind of put an opposition as good as Tupou, as someone who is just kind of mean, not dirty, but you know what I mean by when I say dirty, but like just kind of like a bit of a
He's
nuisance.
got an
And so,
edge. He's got an edge.
yeah, so I think it was just the perfect opposition to play against Porter. And so that's why, you know, when Ellis Genge came on, the scrums just, funnily enough, seemed to be going so much better for them. But yeah, he had a really strong impact on that game, and it was a bit of an odd one, I think, at first that he was brought in, because he hadn't played any of the other tests, obviously. So, but yeah, I think it was just a game that was destined to be Australia's. You know, they came out absolutely wanting it, and the Lions clearly didn't want it as much. And you say about the accuracy of the Wallabies as well, like they were just so sharp. Everything seemed to be going right for them. But it seemed that, after a couple of phases from the Lions, they get out to the backs and it was just like, oh, well, another drop ball, another scrum, another penalty. And that was just kind of the story of the game.
It was sort of was that two sides of it. You got one side of it, you've got the accuracy of the Wallabies, and then the Lions just dropping balls and just balls quite not going to hand, just wasn't coming together for them. And the Wallabies did a fantastic job of disrupting their flow and never letting them get into a rhythm, even after that try was scored by Jack Morgan. Sort of with 17 minutes to go, you sort of think, can the Lions mount a challenge here? Can they get back into this game and secure that 3-0, but he just sort of went down the upper pitch and just sort of choked them and then scored, and then it was sort of game over when Tate McDermott scored. But I think it's really interesting the way you sort of speak about the Wallabies' accuracy and the kicking game and that sort of thing, because I think it's actually been a progression, in my opinion, from Test 1 to Test 3. Test 1, I'll tell you quite bluntly, and I'm sort of a man that's sort of like, I'm not as sort of, I guess, as forthright with my opinions as Luke would be, but I thought the Wallabies were absolutely shocking in that first test. I think they were terrible. They were really, really bad, and we sort of thought this series could be a walkthrough if they don't get their act together. But you sort of went from that. I mean, they were better in the sort of the end of that game, I suppose, when the Lions sort of tapered off. But I think to go from that to what they did in the second test, where it was free-flowing rugby, they sort of kept that going for probably about 50, 60 minutes, and then they sort of just ran out of energy at the end, to then go to Test 3, where you've got what I thought was a test match performance, which it was 80 minutes, control, accuracy, precision, and just delivery in the red zone, and just taking their chances when they came. And I think that was a really good sign of progression for those three tests. What do you sort of think about that and sort of the Wallabies' progression and sort of moving far past this Lions series?
No, I completely agree. From Test 1 to Test 3, it was a clear incline of performances. It took them a while, obviously, to settle into a team, and obviously, injuries didn't help. That kind of skeleton coming back in, and other players kind of dropping out here, there, and everywhere. So it was definitely, I said it at the start of this episode. There are a lot of glimmers of hope for Australia going forward, and I think going into this, rugby championship, or what was the Tri Nations, obviously the addition of Argentina, I think they're really going to give some of the, those top teams a run for the money. Obviously, New Zealand played France earlier this year while the internationals were all going on, and that was. New Zealand they're so on fire at the minute. Like, I think Luke was saying that they're going through a bit of a transition, but they seamless from them. The Brazzy's still doing his usual thing of trying to figure out as many laws as he can kind of bounce around. I don't know if you saw it. Was it against Italy
Yeah.
where they did that line out jump in the middle of
Yeah,
in
it
the
was
middle of the
like
pitch?
an intentional scrum as well. Like, intentionally didn't kick it 10 metres and then had, or what definitely looked intentional anyway, and then had the scrum on the sort of the middle of the pitch.
Yeah.
So you sort of, I think, you've got that. You've got those two teams that are going to have to come up against Australia. Just a question before I guess we sort of move on to just sort of discuss our overall sort of legacy of the series and the combined teams and players of the series and stuff like that, which we've got coming up. This is a bit of a hypothetical question, because I mean, shoulda, coulda, woulda, but you sort of look at Nick White's and Will Skilton's impact and Tupou at prop. Do you think if someone like, I think Nick White, who was available from Test 1, I think if he had been brought in earlier, maybe Test 1 and Test 2, maybe bringing in Tupou, who was also fit, sort of Test 1 and Test 2, do you think that could have made the difference that had to be made to sort of win Australia the series? It's just an interesting hypothetical that I've been sort of thinking about since Saturday.
No, it's a great question. I think I'm always a strong believer, and this is why I was so for Farrell being in the squad, is that you need that experience. Someone like Farrell who has now just played his fourth Lions tour. That's like, it's such invaluable experience, because no one else has done that. You've got someone who's still, to an extent, at the top of his game. Obviously petered off. He still can't tackle very well, but He's still a
He had a
great
bit of a dodgy
impact.
one in that game as well, didn't he? He
Yeah,
blew it
he
away, so yeah.
he's just all shoulders. It's like whenever he goes into a tackle, his arms just don't work, and it's quite funny.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, like I say, and I think that was kind of what the problem with Wales has been, is that they lost bigger Alan Wynne-Jones, Ken Owens, Sam Warburton, all those massive players in key positions all at the same time, like Liam Williams as well. Um, and the only person they kind of kept on was Josh Adams, who, as a winger, and it's no offense to wingers, but you're one of the most least impactful players really on a pitch, except for kind of getting the ball at the end of the line and dotting it down. But I'm not saying, I'm not criticising wingers in any way because they are obviously important. But when you've got other players like a prop, a second row, a back row, a scrum half, a 10, they are so much more important, I believe,
I think
to a
Josh
to a
Adams,
squad.
out of the people you've mentioned there as well, is probably the least experienced out of the ones as well.
Yeah.
He's young.
So when you get rid of all those players in one go, it's difficult to kind of have a platform to build up on because you're kind of having to start at the bottom, and those foundations are sometimes quite difficult to start. So I think that's why Wales struggles so much. So looking at the Australia team now, a big digression there, but I think Nick White, having him just there, even if he was just coming off the bench, giving McDermott time. Giving him the starting jersey and then having Nick White to kind of see out the game. I think it's always good, especially with a nine, because England have done it for years. It was Ben Youngs for a while, it was Danny Kerr for a bit, and I think it's just really important to kind of have that kind of settler um, to a game. So yeah, I think for Nick White, definitely there would have been some kind of. I think it would have swung the momentum slightly. Maybe the aggregate score would have been bigger would have been in Australia's favour, but I still think it would have been a 2-1 victory to the
Yeah,
Lions.
I think the way they were set up in that sort of first test, I don't know if they were ever gonna when they were ever gonna win that one. But it was
Yeah.
an interesting hypothetical. I thought I'd throw it out.
No,
I
no,
think
it's
also you're right about the sort of if Australia had won that second test, the Lions would have come out with some serious fire in that third. I mean, you sort of saw how they did it in 2013 when they just killed them in that third test, and I
mm,
think it was probably, I would say personally, watching both series in 2013 and then 2025, I'd say there's probably a similar gap between the two teams. In both 2013 and 2025. But it was an interesting hypothetical to throw out to you. But
no,
we'll move
absolutely.
on to sort of do a couple of sort of interesting debates, sort of like a combined series teams for any player that's played for Australia and Lions on this test. Sort of we'll do like a combined 15. So for loose head prop, who would you go for there?
Or so it's your two options are Slipper or Genge. I'm going to go Ellis Genge purely for his on-field outside of scrum abilities. I think ball in hand, he's one of the best ball carriers for a front row. Well, I'll rephrase that for a prop. And I think it's such an asset to have. The game's changed a lot from, 10, 15 years ago, where a prop was kind of just your pillar who would just stand there, kind of lean on a ruck. Prime example, a fairly good friend of mine, Lagovi Mullapola. He was just one of those people who just, he wouldn't really carry too much, but he'd kind of lean on a ruck. He'd be there to lift you at a line out, he'd win you a scrum penalty, and that would be, his job done. I think it was Dan Cole, when they were talking about the love of rugby, he said one of his best games he ever had. He did 0 carries, 0 tackles, and won about 5 scrum penalties. I think it was the semi-final against New Zealand in 2019.
2019, yeah, I think the one
Yeah,
they won, yeah.
yeah, and so he said that was one of the best games he's ever played. But and that's all sometimes you need from a prop. But I think Ellis Genge, yeah, he'd get my nod just for
Yeah.
his ball handling.
I think that's really interesting the way you sort of say that because I think Genge, like I've also like done like I've listened to a few things with Ellis Genge because obviously he's a very interesting character as well,
Yeah.
and I think you're right. He's got that sort of he's good, and we all always rugby fans we speak about it in the loose, all forwards in the loose, which is basically ball carrying, sort of the stuff that you do off the set piece, and I think he has got all of that in abundance. He always has. He's always had a bit of sort of pace. He's always had huge power. He's been called the baby rhino in the past.
Yeah.
But I think I heard something recently where he's put on a lot of weight. Actually, he's put on 10 kilo or something like that. I think his thoughts with that there was to sort of become a better test match player, because as much as you've got that in the loose stuff that you speak about with Ellis Genge, you've also got that Dan Cole stuff as well, where you're solid, you're good in the scrum, you're dominant in the scrum, you're good in the sort of off the ball stuff, as well as that on the ball, I guess, more flashy stuff. And I think Genge has showed that sort of in abundance in this test series. I think also Slipper is also quite close in this battle. I had considered going for Slipper because he played all 3 tests, and I think he's been an absolute massive servant for the Wallabies. But I think you're just right, just like Genge in that first test, just imperious, really big leader for the Lions as well, really big talker for them, and then you sort of see the impact in the second test to sort of help them sort of close out that game, and I think that's probably enough to award it to Genge.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can have much of a debate about Parecki's been pretty decent, but would you go for Dan Sheehan? I've got Dan Sheehan.
I would
Yeah,
absolutely go for
Dan
Dan Sheehan.
Sheehan.
As
Yeah.
much as I was slating him a couple of minutes ago, 2 tries in 2 tests, outstanding. So I don't think you can have too many complaints about that one.
Yeah, well, you'll see it in he wasn't the best in the third test, obviously, but you can sort of see his impact. He's scored 2 tries. He's been a key figure. He's actually got banned for 4 games as well.
Did see that, yeah.
Yeah, for that clear out on Tom Lina, which Luke will sort of mention that he thought should have been a red card in the
Yeah, he was
video.
fuming about that, wasn't he?
Yeah, we'll put that in the end of the video, but that's a little preview for Luke's thoughts. But he's got his wishes there. It was a
Yeah.
pretty bad clear out, to be fair. But we'll put Shane in there, and then who would you go for tight head prop? Is it Furlong? Is it, or would you go for one of the Australians?
I think I'd go for one of the Australians. I am actually
Yeah.
getting the team lineups up now because I can't remember who
Well,
played in the other
it was
ones.
Alatoa and it was Tupou, the 2 ones that started. Alatoa started the
Yeah.
first test, and then
Yeah.
Tupou started the last test. I think if you're talking about pound for pound impact on a game, like the most obvious impact in terms of you're talking in the loose again, you probably go Tupou in that third test because of the big carries that he made. I personally
Yeah.
would go for Furlong myself. I don't know if you.
No, I think Tupou would be definitely a good shout. I I like Furlong, but I think he's a Dan Cole. He's at this stage because he's there for the experience, and I 100% agree that he should have been picked in this Lions squad. Because he brings a wealth of knowledge. When you've been scrummaging for that long, there's not much that doesn't phase you, and you can kind of just crack on with your job. But I think I'm actually going to go for Alatoa for my pick.
Alatoa.
Yeah, just because I think he probably played better than Furlong when you look at performances. But I'll give credit to Tuvo for his outstanding performance in the third test.
Yeah, we'll agree to disagree on that one, but yeah, no,
Yeah, that's
that's
fine.
a fair that's a fair point. I think we could be here all day if we debated on some of these, so
Yeah,
we'll just go for our own. We got number 4, sort of one of the second rowers, or who would you go for? Probably the
I
second
think
or the
I
third.
think we're gonna go. I think we're gonna say the same people, and I'm gonna go Itoje and Skelton.
Oh, I put. I don't know why. Why did I put Frost? I put a Toge in Frost. I completely forgot. I somehow forgot about Nick Skeleton. But yeah, I 100% agree with you there. Yeah, I'll go for it.
Speaks
Yeah,
for itself.
Skeleton and Toge. I think Skeleton coming in that second and third test. Yeah, you're right. It speaks for itself. Huge impact, and Toge as captain, despite
Yeah.
Luke's protestations, wherever
Yeah.
he may be. Um, uh, in the back row, who would you go for? Sort of the 3 back row players.
Ooh, this is going to be a tough one. Okay, I'm going to go for number 8. I'm going to go Harry Wilson. Um,
I agree.
cons Consistency just there. Conan definitely got better as the test went on, especially in that second test. I thought he was outstanding. But I'm going to say Harry Wilson. He was just really brilliant throughout. Uh, Back row. There's, you see, there's good options. Um,
It's tough. It's tough, especially when you see that Tom Hooper performance in the final test.
no, I'm going to go. Tom Curry.
I've got him.
And I'm also gonna go. See, it would just be a cop out to go Burn. Second test. If it was second test alone, I'd go Burn. But for the whole series, I'm actually gonna go. Is it a cop out to go Valentini? No.
No, it's hard to pick someone that only played one of the tests, but I suppose when you're looking at the impact that he had in that 45 minutes, I wouldn't be the worst shot in the world. I think just probably I would go for Tag Burn myself, just because of the impact he had across the whole series, especially in that second test, that try
I
he
think a
scored.
lot. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that
Yeah,
try that kind of that muscle that he has, and I think I was very skeptical about him playing in the first test because I thought in the warm-up games he just didn't seem himself, and it was a bit worrying. But he proved himself and just showed why he is one of the best sixers in the world. But I think a lot has got to be said for McWright as well. Kind of there every single test, kind of doing the dirty work. But when you got if we were going to play these squads, he's very similar to Tom Curry. So I think you're
yeah.
probably right. Tyler
I
Byrne
think
is
you're the
the
sport
right
for both.
choice.
Yeah, yeah. So is that who are you gonna go for six there? Was
I'll
that
I'll, I'll agree with you with Tyler Byrne.
happy days, happy days. Glad to see it, glad to see it. I don't know if we're gonna have any arguments about. Well, to be fair, we might do. With a bit of Nick White in there, but 9 and 10. Who do you have there?
I'm going to shake it up. I'm going to say Nick White, and I'm going to say Ben Russell as my 10. Um,
Okay.
I think, yeah, credit Gibson Park, outstanding player, but was he playing at his best? No. Did Nick White have one of the best games of his life? Yes. You know, this is all very hypothetical. So I'd just put Nick White in there because I think he was outstanding in that final test.
I think if you're talking about a sole impact on one of the tests, then I think Nick White had an impact on that third test, unlike what Gibson Park had on any of the tests. But I still think Gibson Park. I actually agree. I actually disagree with that because I actually think throughout, even in the third test, I thought it was fairly decent. But especially in that first test, he just absolutely just almost almost bullied the Wallabies, like not physically obviously, but like with just like control in the game. He was just sending them wherever he wanted them, to be honest. And then that second test as well, I think just the accuracy that he had. Personally go for Gibson Park and Russell. Moving on to the centres, would you have 12-13? This is a very interesting one actually. We've got a lot of good options here.
Yeah.
Ekatau, Aki, Tuipulotu, and then you've got the outside centres with Hugh Jones,
Dually.
Swali. Even had Owen Farrell in there if you fancy going a wee bit rogue, spicing it up and probably annoying a couple of people on YouTube and TikTok as well.
So when you proposed the idea of this initially, I thought you were just speaking about Lions. So I had in my head Puopoloto over Aki because Aki in that final test, it was like he'd never played a game of rugby before. He was dropping things left, right, and centre, and it was just terrible to watch. I know he's Irish, well, by association, but I think he was just garbage in that final test. So I wouldn't say Aki. So I'll I'll give the inside centre spot to Ikitau, and I will give the outside centre spot to Hugh Jones.
Well, it's gonna surprise you. I absolutely agree with you there. Two Pelosi, you probably could. I think if two Pelosi hadn't got injured and you played all three tests, I think you probably would have been your bet because I think you would have made a huge difference. I think Aggie did, by his standards, didn't have the greatest of series, but yeah, I agree with Iketai. I think he just gave them that sort of go forward ball. I think he's moving to Exeter Chiefs next season, which is
Yeah,
absolutely
that's
huge
going to
for
be
him.
awesome.
Massive,
Yeah.
especially with their struggles last year. I don't think they had really like a go forward 12. I think it was more of like a second receiver 12. But yeah, Iketai was fantastic, and then as you say, Jones. It's quite tight, I think, actually between Jones and Swalihi, because I think Swalihi, the first test, he was decent. He had a couple of moments, but they struggled to get him in the game. Second test, he was obviously just burst into life with that Tom Wright try that he set up. I think the
Mm.
third test as well, he was fairly good. You see him having to go at Owen Farrell definitely having to go at him, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think he was really good, but I think you're right. Maybe Hugh Jones, especially in that second test, he was pivotal, and he always gave the Lions that sort of option in the wide channel, just that pace that he's got, and he's just the ability to eye a gap and go through it and just ride the contact. Back three, I've gone for a bit of a rogue one on the left wing here. I'm not sure what's your back three, and then I'll let you know mine. But this is a bit of an interesting one I've got on the left wing.
This is probably the toughest one because
Because the Lions back three by in comparison to the rest of the team, I don't think was the best part of the Lions team.
no, it was definitely the area they struggled with most. I'm going to go right wing. I think is nailed on. It's my left wing that I'm struggling with. Right wing, I'm going to go Jorgensen, and my fullback, I'm going to go Hugo Keenan.
I agree with
Um,
that. Yeah,
left wing,
you're not a fan of Lou, aren't you? You're not a fan.
I no, he was rightly dropped. I'll go Peach. I'll go Peach. I think
Oh
if you're going
really?
on,
Oh
yeah,
really? I've actually also gone for Peach there. That's crazy. I thought
yeah,
I was a wee bit of a rogue one just because he just came in at the last game. But I think you're right. Like, because James Lowe in those first two tests, he had that big moment to set up Tag Burn in the second test, and I think he was okay. I think he was just okay in the first and second
yeah,
test, to be honest, in my opinion. And I really like him, obviously, as an Ireland fan. His big left boot and stuff like that. He's just his ability to carry. But yeah, I don't think he was that great. And then obviously Kinghorn sort of wasn't. He didn't have the best of games in the third test. So you're sort of looking
no,
at the left wingers. Harry Potter went off early in the second test and had sort of like an okay first test. So I think Peach probably, in terms of impact on the game, yeah, no, I think that's spot
yeah,
on. So that's all
yeah.
right. Well, that is our rock and roll. I'll put just for the TikTok clip and YouTube clip that we're gonna do. Here is our teams. There you go. Happy days. So yeah, that was great. Moving on, before we talk about the legacy, is the player of the series for each team, and then we'll go for an overall. Who is your player of the series for the British and Irish Lions?
There's a lot of good shouts. Well, a lot of big shouts. I think. I won't
Who would
say
be
good
your
shouts.
Who would be your nominees? First of all,
My nominees would be Hugh Jones,
as a nominee, but
Hugh
overall.
Jones, Finn Russell, Maro Toje, and Tom Curry. They're my four.
Okay, no
Um,
tag burn in there, no.
no, no Typhon. I don't know. Like there's a lot to be said about him, but I don't know. I think he's not stood out to me. Like he's been solid as a rock, but like I think the other ones have just been like you've looked at the end of the game and gone, wow. Whereas with Tyburn, when you're such a good player like that, you kind of it's just like, yeah, he's done his job, he's put in his
Yeah.
shift, he's done well. But I think the other ones you kind of like, yeah, they've lit it up. Um,
Who would you go for though? Who's the what's the one that you're
I'm going to go for a bit of an outside shot. I'm going to say Tom Curry,
Tom Curry?
because yeah, there was a lot said about him before the start of the first test. Jack Morgan deserves to start. Like Tom Curry's not played well in the warm-up games. Like, what's he doing in the squad, kind of thing. He's just absolutely nullified all of those critics by being he scored twice, if I'm not mistaken. Scored in
Yeah,
the
scored
first
twice
test
in
and
the
the
second
second
test.
test.
Yeah.
Put in some stellar performances, one of the highest tacklers in each of the three games. Um, winning penalties. And I think just the adversity that he was faced with before the start of the first test, then come out and be an absolute star in all three. I think you've got to recognise a great player when you've presented with one. But that's not to say that Q Jones was absolutely brilliant throughout the tour. He was wasn't a shadow of a doubt that he wasn't starting all three ahead of Ringrose. Finn Russell controlled each game brilliantly. Atoje, absolute leader, just doing his job, but doing it with such finesse and such panache. Just really, Itoje doing Itoje things. But a similar argument can be said for him as I said for Byrne. But yeah, Tom Curry is going to be my player of the tour.
I 100% agree with you. It's Tom Curry is mine as well. Yeah. Yeah, isn't it so much better when we all agree with each other on this podcast? Maybe look is the problem. No offense, Luke, you're not the problem. You do make things interesting with your
Yeah,
take.
Luke could have spent 20 minutes arguing why we're so wrong. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, Maro Toje should have never been selected for the British Irish Lions. No, yeah, no. I go for Tom Curry as well. I think you're right. I'm not sure who was actually given it. I think it was. I seen two different ones. I think Finn Russell was given the Howden Insurance Player of the Series, and then Tadhg Beirne was given the Player of the Series. I'm not really sure what the difference was there. I sort of seen a couple of different things, but yeah, Tom Curry, you're looking at across the 3 tests. He scores in that first test. He's superb around the park, just imposing his physicality, carrying well. Second test, again, a lot of the same stuff. I think the biggest moment he actually made in the 3 tests series wasn't one of his tries, wasn't one of sort of, I guess, it was a big hit. It was that intervention on Swali in that second test when
Yeah.
I think they're up by 6 points, aren't they? At the Wallabies, or maybe 9 points rather. It was before that Beirne try anyway, and then they break through with I think it was Harry Wilson, Fraser McWright, and then he gives it to Swally. They've got numbers out wide, and then Tom Curry just comes in and just crunches Swally and he knocks the ball on. And Tom Curry, you rightly say, he's been absolutely fantastic, especially given the flack he's given. And I think Jack Morgan was the people's choice.
Yeah.
Sort of the sympathy everyone had for Wales before the sort of start of the test. I'm sure you didn't have that sympathy all the same, but I certainly did. Yeah, no, Tom Curry, fantastic player, and I think he's probably cemented himself as a great Lion on this tour, especially when you consider last tour in South Africa, where he was really, really good as well. But yeah, no, absolutely agree with that with Tom Curry. Absolutely fantastic player. And congratulations, Tom, you're the Ruck and Roll Lions player of the series.
I'm sure he will hide that. Sorry, I'm sure he will display that accolade very high
Yeah, we'll
on
say,
his
well, the
mantelpiece.
trophy's in the post, Tom. Don't worry. The trophy's in the post. We'll do a little bit of something different. I don't think Australia actually did a player of the series, but who would be your player of the series for Australia?
I mean, it would be very easy to just go, yeah, do you know what, Will Skelton.
Mm.
But I'm gonna go Jorgensen.
Okay.
I think that throughout the 3 he was just really good. You know, that interception, that high kick claim against Hugo Keenan in the second test, I want to say,
Mm.
was
Yeah. Or first test.
unbelievable. First test, I nearly
Yeah.
said the first test. But yeah, that claim in the first test was outstanding. I think it takes that that's something that you can't really you teach it, but you to master it the way he did. You know, kind of they met almost at the same time, and to kind of come out on top in those situations it's exceptional. You know, one of the few players who played all 3 games as well. But I think just every game he was just on top form, just kind of a real presence on the wing. And I slated Josh Adams about his impact on a game for the Wales and that team. But no, I think he was definitely one of the most outstanding players for Australia. Don't tell me you've gone for the same guy.
I haven't on this occasion, although I rate the shout. I really do. I think Jorgensen was fantastic. I think in that first test, you're rightly so. He's very good. He's just a smart winger. He just positions himself very well. He kicks quite a decent level, I think, and he's rapid, absolutely razor sharp, and scores in that third test as well. I've gone for Nick Skelton. I know it was the obvious choice, but it's the choice that I sort of felt like I had to make, because I
Yeah.
think just the sheer impact he had in that second test, just to up
Mm.
the physicality and really get stuck into the Lions, was huge. And then that obviously carried off forward into the third test, which ultimately won them the game. I think honourable mention has to probably go to Nick White for just the performance he put in the third test to win, which I
Yeah.
sort of thought was the man of the match from the third test. I think Len Ikatoy, as we spoke about, has been really, really good. Harry Wilson has marshalled them really well as skipper, and I think he's a very good captain they've got going forward. Fraser McWright, we've got a couple of ones. Tupou, I think, was decent. I think Parecki had a couple of decent games as well. So a lot of bright sparks for the Wallabies, but I would go for Nick Skelton. Who would you go for overall though? You've got Tom Curry and Will Skelton, or Tom Curry and Jorgensen there.
No, that's I'd still back Tom Curry.
Yeah, no, I'd
No.
do the same. I'd be the same. Yeah, I think Tom, like, LSE is on the winning side as well, so that sort of that helps matters. But yeah, no. Well, that was our combined teams of the series and our player of the series. So congratulations to Tom Curry, Will Skelton, and Max Jorgensen, and also Tom Curry again. Tom Curry is going to be He's going to be absolutely
He's
chuffed
going to
with
be over
this.
the moon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just on holiday. He just won Player of the Series for the Ruck and Roll Show. I mean, honestly, life doesn't really get much better than that, to be honest.
No, he might
But yeah,
retire after this, I reckon.
he might as well. What's the point in even playing in 2029 Lions series? He's cooked. He can't get any better than that. But yeah, we'll move on to the sort of legacy of the Lions series. So the Lions, obviously, they're going to disband. That team's not really going to play together again. Before we sort of talk about moving on to 2029 and sort of the development of the game in the Northern Hemisphere and the sort of the British Isles and Ireland as well. Sort of how good was this series, and how good is this team in the sort of the professional era of the British and Irish Lions?
It's
I
kind
got a
of
bit of
where this.
flack. I got a bit of flack for this by a couple of people. They thought I was trying to suggest they were the best ever. I was I'd set the record straight. I was putting the hypothetical out there. Maybe it was a wee bit sort of rambunctious for me to say, but yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on. Carry on.
That's right. I think this will definitely be a test that I look back in years to come and go, oh, what a great series that was. And that's a personal note. I'll remember this for a long time, and it was a great one to remember. I think it's definitely not the best the Lions have ever been, but kind of new management. First time Andy Farrell's taken charge of a series. Obviously he's been in the background stuff in previous tours, but first one where he's been the man, calling the shots. I think on the whole, he chose players 90% well initially. Kind of picked the starting teams very well. Kind of gave rotation well, throughout, giving people fair opportunity to play. So I think it's definitely one that not just myself, but people look back on and be like, yeah, what a great tour that was. Andy, if you're listening, I'm sure you're not, but I think the only thing I'd say for him for next time round is just kind of is a bit more depth in some positions, because Alex Mitchell, he played in every single game. Um, and that, Thomas Williams, I think, had he been fit, would have probably played a lot of
Yeah.
if not all of the tests against Australia. But again, like, the fact that there was only two kind of real nines being chosen. Ben White came in late, so although he played exceptionally, there was only kind of two out and out 15s in the squad. But you kind of just had a lot of people covering a lot of bases, where I think he needs to next time around just kind of get solidity in positions. There was a lot of back rows to choose from, and I did not envy him one bit trying to
Yeah.
choose
Honestly, but
options out of that. But I think that would just be the one thing I'd say going forward into 2029. Looking at this test alone, yes, it's an outstanding achievement. First time in a couple of tests that they've won. And as I said at the start of the episode as well, a, there's a core group now that will definitely go on and play again in 2029.
mm,
Ellis Genge, Blair Kinghorn will probably be there again. Tommy Freeman, uh, Tom Curry might have another one in him. Itoje probably have another one in him. Just to name a few. But there's definitely a core group who, even people who didn't get to play, like Henry Pollock, he'll probably be back, but he'll be in 4 years' time.
as
Imagine
much as
what
that
he's done
pains
at
me to
20.
say it.
As much, it pains me to say no, but in 4 years' time, but he should be an incredible player, and he'll be a great asset to have. Looking forward, great signs for the future, but based on this one, you can't bat them down at all. So yeah, credit and hats off to them.
Well, you've actually answered. That was going to be my next question. Was the sort of who do you think is going to be in the test squad for the next 4 years from this squad? Yeah, I think you're right, rightly so with what you say there in terms of a massive achievement, not the best Lions team there ever has been. I think you a lot of people said probably in terms of the team that they were going up against, it's probably not the best they've gone up against the Lions, especially given the last sort of 8 years when you've been going up against world champions in both times. But yeah, you're rightly so. I sort of think in terms of the nine debate you're talking about there, in terms of Alex Mitchell playing all 10 games, thought like I do agree with part of that because I think he did bring in Ben White, who was the next best choice realistically, and he used them in sort of all the remaining sort of warm up games as from a starter point of view. So I partly agree with that. I do think Alex Mitchell was just clearly his second choice, and he wanted to go throughout that. But I do sort of agree with a semblance of what you've said there, because I think players like a Ben White and like couple others maybe could have been brought in that third test just to bring it a little bit more edge to the game. That's
Mm.
sort of the one thing I sort of felt with Farrell. Obviously, he wanted to go for his strongest team, but I felt like certain boys, especially someone like a Josh Van der Fleer, could have been brought in. I know we speak about how great Tom Curry was, but even just to bring in someone to bring that a little bit of edge in, like a Scott Cummings, even off the bench or something like that, just to someone that hasn't sort of been in the picture that can sort of give a little bit more bite, who's got a bit of something to prove. So that's sort of what I would have said was the one thing that I would have done differently if I was Andy Farrell. But we're not slating you, Andy, and please do subscribe and like and comment as much as you want. Give us all the flag you want, Andy. You go ahead. Let rip. We'll not report you. No. Yeah, well, you rightly sort of said and moved on to the 2029 Lion series as well, and that. And you speak about a couple of players that are going to be sort of key in the next series. You look forward in 4 years' time. We'll not go into it in any great depth because it's 4 years' time. A lot can happen in rugby in 4 years' time. I mean, we'll come on to it later, but Rugby 360 could be well and truly up and running in 4 years' time. So who knows what
Mm.
effect that's going to have in the game. And in terms of the next 4 years and sort of the how the teams develop, what's British and Irish sides do you see developing the best? And then when just to finish on that point about the 2029 Lions, when you compare them to the All Blacks and their resurgence right now, do you think it'll be Andy Farrell, and do you think the Lions can win their first Test series in New Zealand in those 4 years with the projections that are going on right now?
Oh, a lot of greatness in that
Sorry,
question.
I've just asked about
A
four
lot of
questions in
yeah,
one there.
but I
Sorry,
love it.
I got a wee bit carried away sometimes there, didn't I?
It's
Um,
all
so,
right.
so
I
yeah, just
think
like the progression of the sides. First of all, what are you reckoning with that?
I won't lie. English rugby is in a very difficult place at the minute. Kind of everybody focuses on on the Premiership, or as it's now called the Prem. They're looking at closing the league off, adding two more teams, and kind of just leaving it at that. Kind of similar layout to how it is in the URC. Ireland rugby is pretty good. It's in a pretty stable position, I'd say. I'm not. You'll be able to tell me if I'm wrong in that, but I think it seems like it's in a pretty good place at the
It's
minute.
it's in a good place in terms of the structures, but when you look at the national team and the sort of the reliance on Leinster to produce most of your talent, I think that's maybe you're seeing a lot of the sort of the key players for Ireland, and sort of coming towards the end. You got your tag Burns and your tag Furlongs, a lot of tags. They're coming.
And the
They're
FG as well.
they're coming towards their end. I guess their sort of international careers, and probably in a couple of years' time. So yeah, I think Ireland, they'll plateau a little bit for a couple of years, and then until they bring a couple of new players in. You got your Ryan Bairds and stuff like that. Um, but I think they'll compete in the Six Nations, but I can see France being quite dominant for a couple of years. I actually think England, you sort of speak about the struggles they have there. I think you have struggles financially, and you have struggles with the sort of the structure. The structure's not as good as Irish rugby, but I think like with the talent you're producing is probably at a current better level, especially when you see the under 20s than Ireland's is right now. When you got people like
Mm.
Guy Pepper coming through, what's Asher Acapulco, I think is that
A
how
Baku
you say
for
his name?
sure.
Oh, absolutely butchered that. I do apologise if you are watching. So yeah, I think you've got a lot of big players coming through there. So I actually do think the English game, if Borthwick is the man to take it forward, which I think he's done a good job. I'm not 100% certain he's going to win your World Cup. I'll be honest.
Mm.
In 2 years' time, he's got the player. I think he will have the players to do it when he goes there, because he's got a nice mix of experience and youth there. So that's those two. Wales and Scotland. What are you sort of thinking there?
I mean, Scotland, I'm going to have absolutely no knowledge about this, but they've got Edinburgh and they've got Glasgow, and that's about it. And it's a shame because it's almost like the English league system is that you just kind of forget about everybody else that's below them. Like I couldn't name you a single other. team that plays in Scotland. I mean, there's probably one in Inverness, but who knows?
It's a
Um,
rugby club which our recent interview of Bruce Houston played for, who plays in the Ayrshire Bulls as well as another team that
oh, there you go. So
yeah, but they're not
yeah,
they're not like professionals. They don't play in the
yeah.
rugby, obviously. Um,
But
but
yeah,
a club, yeah,
if you're a Scottish player coming through the system, you're playing for Edinburgh or you're playing for Glasgow.
yeah.
Um,
Glasgow
I
have been quite
mean,
good the last couple of years, though, haven't they?
yeah, Glasgow have been very good. Obviously they've got the other two have lost to each brother.
Frankie Smith, coach for them,
Yeah,
has been very good.
yeah. So they've got by all accounts they've got a good system in place with those two. But beyond that, behind that, God knows. And Wales, I mean, everybody knows what's going on with Wales at the minute. Kind of wanting
Yeah.
to reduce it down to from 4 pro teams to 3 teams.
Two
Super
teams
Rugby.
potentially by 27,
Oh,
27, 28. So by the
well,
next time the Lions comes rolling round, we could be down to two Welsh teams alongside two Scottish
uh,
teams.
which would just be kind of
Yeah,
it'd be terrible to see for if you're a Welsh fan,
yeah.
particularly. But I mean, they're getting it right by the looks of things in the Super Rugby Cymru and um, in the Welsh Prem and everything below that. The national sport of Wales is rugby, and everybody plays rugby. All of my mates who are Welsh, they play rugby, or they go down to the local rugby club, and it's just such a good community spirit. But it's kind of the opposite of some places, like for Scotland, where they've got the foundations there, but it's once you get a bit higher up than that, it kind of fizzles out. Um, and then the English system, you've got great foundations again. The league system, how it works is brilliant. Again, a good community feel. Everybody's playing everybody each week, but then you get higher and higher. The championship is a greatly contested league system, but no one's left. No one's gone up to the Premiership in the last, I want to say, 4 or 5 seasons. Newcastle Falcons, the last team to go up, and then it's been like, oh no, sorry, we're kind of closing it off because you
Yeah.
don't meet stadium requirements or you don't meet this, or the people who can qualify to go up aren't finishing in the right positions, or you've got Ealing who are spending 4 million compared to the other professional team in the league, Doncaster Knights, who are spending probably 800,000. But that discrepancy is just it's wild. And Ealing are probably spending more than some Premiership clubs, but the only reason they can't go up is because the stadium requirements don't meet what the RFU want. And
Yeah.
what the RFU want is a spectacle. And yeah, that's great. But I think every Ealing fan would agree that they'd rather have a smaller stadium, which they can absolutely pack out, rather than a massive stadium that they're going to not even half fill. The same thing happened to the Dragons with their ground at Llanelli. They expanded the stadium. They were getting the same amount of numbers, but because it was in a bigger stadium, it just looked empty. So
Yeah, yeah, the scarred
there's
it.
problem.
Scarred it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So
Yeah. Aye.
sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean the Dragons. I do apologise.
Oh,
Um,
it's okay.
but
You're Welsh. You just need to brush up on the Welsh. I think it was a mispronunciation of a Welsh word or something like that.
yeah,
We'll
something
move
like
on to that. Yeah, no, I think you're right in terms of you've got, yeah, as we say, you've got the talent coming out of England, and it's a great product. The English Premiership,
that. And yeah,
it's my favourite league to watch. Actually,
yeah.
it is, and maybe that's just because I'm a wee bit depressed about where Ulster Rugby have finished this season. But I want to get away from the URC because it just depresses me. But no, I think the English Prem have a good product in terms of the league. I think it's just, you're right, that sort of system just needs to hopefully can be fixed, and you can sort of have more of a meritocracy, because that's really what I think. There's more of a discrepancy between sort of provincial sides in Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and obviously Italy as well, and maybe South Africa, there's less of a discrepancy with the cheese and stuff like that. But where, you wouldn't have that relegation promotion thing, because the gap is so big. But in the
Mm,
English, from the English Championship to the English Prem, you see English sides in the English Premiership Rugby Cup. You see Championship sides beating Premiership sides. Now, granted, it's probably weakened Premiership sides, but there's less of a discrepancy there. You can definitely see that. I think especially with big backings coming in, sort of lower level Premiership sides such as Newcastle, which is going to be a big one as well. I think that could be quite big for the English game. Red Bull coming in there,
yeah.
but Yeah. So you're sort of thinking what's your sort of overall thoughts in terms of the British and Irish game? It's sort of like there's talent there, but the systems maybe aren't right quite in place.
Yeah, I think the systems are flawed and they need fixing on their own. But what is coming out of them is exceptional. It's exceptional talent. Again, but when you're comparing it to somewhere, it's difficult because, it's integrated systems. Whereas you look at France, for a prime example, their top four leagues are amazing. They get such great crowds even at the fourth tier of French rugby.
Yeah.
Um, the government actually pumps in money into the rugby clubs to make them survive, to get people involved because it's a bigger spectacle. I mean, we're quite unfortunate in the UK because football is so dominant. And so it's kind of hard to compete with that. It's fighting a losing battle. But in France, football's not as big. Yes, it's still big, but you've got rugby, which is it's almost on a level playing field. So,
Yeah, I think when
you
you've got
know,
the French, I mean, as someone that watches probably a lot of both. Like, I think you've got in France, you've got something that probably inspires more passion in rugby than you do in football, and that's even within like the
yeah,
French national side, which has won a World Cup in the last sort of 7 years. But I think you're right, like the passion that drives in the game in the France and and the crowds that they get is something that is just like is absolutely huge. I think that's something that you're maybe sort of seeing with English Premiership. With the amount of sort of you've got a couple of sort of bigger stadiums that are going to be used next year for a couple of English Premiership fixtures. There might be a change that's made, but I think you're right. Just needs the backing and the funding and the structures the French have put in place where they've pumped a lot of money in. I think it was started with teams like Toulon with that super team and just billionaires just coming in just backing it. And that just needs to hopefully we can get a couple of like with the sign of Red Bull coming to Newcastle Falcons, we can hopefully get a couple more and just more money pumped into the game in England, especially because I think it's been published recently. There's been a lot of losses for English rugby clubs. I think basically
yeah.
every side's operating at a loss.
Mm.
So yeah, I think if that can get hopefully fixed and structures can get fixed, I think you're right to compare it to that French rugby game. We can hopefully France don't run away with the Six Nations every single year, which
Yeah.
I fear they may do for a couple of years. Yeah,
Mm.
but
My
yeah, no,
final
that
closing point, I will just say, is
go ahead.
the reason everybody watches sport is for Jeopardy. And if you get rid of Jeopardy in the English game by, having a closed off league and kind of having the top league as not the top league, then what's the point? You
Mm,
know, the reason the French system works so well is because you've got, you know, from the very bottom to the very top, you can climb your way up and get to the very top. And I think that's just it's so great to see. They have that in football. They have it in the French system. Why not keep it in the English
mm,
system? Because get rid of all these. I get the safety regulations, but for like stadium regulations and stuff, just let people play, let people enjoy it, let a team like Ealing come up, and if they get absolutely battered, then then they get battered. But it's a different team. I don't know about you. I love the Prem, but I'm bored of seeing the same five, kind of rounds of fixtures being played every single year.
yeah.
So, it needs
You
something a
want to see
bit.
a
We
better
need a bit of
change.
change. Yeah.
Would you say you're obviously making the position really clear on the English print? I absolutely agree with you on that. URC, would you say there needs to be sort of like they need to force a bit of a change there and maybe make it a bit more of a sort of two league system? Do you think that would be help their game? Or do you think, I somewhat think the URC just sort of suits the way it is at the minute. I think I don't know,
Yeah,
sort of
I
hard to
think
see
it's under.
what change to make there.
I'm very much of the agreement that if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So at the moment, the URC works well, but I'm against the English system using it because they've got a system in place already that should work. But the URC is it's a combination of different nations playing against each other, so it works. But I think in 4 or 5 years times they're gonna have to look at it and go, right, is this getting boring? Are we still getting the same amount of numbers for each game? Because I won't lie, if you're playing, it's great that you can welcome the Hollywood bet sharks or whatever, and Ulster will welcome, all the Irish teams, the Scottish teams, and Welsh teams, and it's great. But is that going to get a bit boring? Is that going to get a bit monotonous? So are they going to have to change that in future?
Logistically, it's challenging for those South African sides, but I think it does
Yeah.
financially work for them all the same. It's challenging, and it's challenging mentally and physically for those players, and you see it a lot within the. It depends how a team's going. Like you see with the Bulls this year, they almost sort of pie off the Champions Cup because they're like, we're not going to win the Champions Cup. They don't think they're going to win the Champions Cup. We're going to focus on the
Mm.
ERC because we have a better chance to win it. Of course they didn't. They lost to Leinster in the final, but they still made the final. I think that's probably the key flaw, especially when you're inviting the South African teams into the Champions Cup, which I think has been fairly decent. You've seen a couple of good games, but yeah, it's sort of a tough one because you're right. It's the sort of the closed off league, and it always sort of has been. But you don't really know what to change there because I'd say the gulf in quality between Ulster and Leinster and Munster and Connacht, and then I don't know other sides like, you know, Bridge, Ballymena, Clontarf. Obviously the Leinster players will go and play for a sides, UCD or something like that. You just when they're sort of like when they're getting their fitness back, like it's still a good level, the All Ireland League, and it's still a good level sort of below in the Welsh Premiership, for example. But I think that drop off is quite a bit lower, and from what I can see. From those teams. But it might be something that you could trial out, I suppose. But I suppose it's just never been something that's been in the pipeline. You never see really Ulster playing. Um, you never see Ulster playing Banbridge really, or
Yeah.
Ballymena. Ulster sides like that really. Or you rarely see it anyway. So yeah, it's sort of hard to see what you could do there. But I suppose we'll see what it is. You're right to sort of say you'll see how the URC product sort of goes down in the next couple of years because I think it's been fairly successful in the last couple of years and it's sort of helped out the South African side. I think they're thrilled to be on it, to be honest, compared to the Super Rugby. But yeah, well, that was it. We probably digressed a wee bit more than we
Yeah.
probably planned to with that, but it's a rabbit hole you can go down to into when you sort of
Yeah.
go into the whole structures of the league. And obviously we're just speculating answers here and speculating how the sort of the moves are going to be made in those separate leagues and nations.
Yeah.
But we'll move on to
You could probably
Australia.
crop a lot. Yeah, you could probably crop out a lot
Yeah,
of what we just said there.
yeah, well, we'll keep it in because it's an interesting discussion to have, just as fans of the game and players, guys that we've obviously both played through school and sort of seen how sort of set different systems and watched a lot of rugby ourselves over the years. So it's an interesting discussion to have all the same. But we'll move on to Australia. Sorry, any Australian fans that may or may not be watching. We did a massive digression there, but more. We're looking at Australia. Obviously, they'll not have another Lions test for 12 years' time, so there's absolutely no point in talking about that. But Australia, who are building towards a home World Cup, spoke about Joe Schmidt, who's going to be sort of moving on from Australia. He'll not be taking charge of them anymore. I think he's improved them massively. Obviously, I think he's had a huge impact on the Wallabies in the past couple of years, sort of taking them from that 2023 World Cup to where they are now. It's been really quite impressive with what he's done. But you think after that Lions series, and you talk about the aggregate score, only sort of 1 point behind the Lions, with I suppose with a lack of context there, but 1 point behind them nonetheless. Where do you think Australian rugby is at right now in terms of moving in short term into the Rugby Championship and then longer term into that World Cup?
I think it's in a good place. I think, comparing it to what it was a few years ago, it's definitely a lot better. Um, in that, what was it, the last World Cup that we had in France, they really underperformed. I think even in the Japan World Cup, they weren't the best, and that was kind of the start of their downfall almost. I wouldn't
Yeah,
call
they
it the
got
downfall,
they
but
got they got pretty like heavily beaten by England in the quarterfinal, didn't they? It was like something like
yeah.
38.
So yeah, so I think that was kind of the start. It was like, players were starting to drop out, and it just wasn't what we'd expect of an Australian team. But I think this Lions tour will have taught them a lot. It will have taught Joe Schmidt a lot going into the Rugby Championship, and I think for the incoming head coach, it'll be
Yeah,
an eye opener
yeah.
Yeah, if I was him, I'd be really excited to get into the role because he's clearly got a good group of players, now a good key group of players who he can kind of pick from. Obviously, different coaches prefer different players, and they'll want certain aspects of a player in a position or whatever. But this is a very really they've got the building blocks now. They've got kind of key players in each position who they can go right. You're in, and then they can build up and they can create what what was a great rugby nation back into a great contention. I think they'll still struggle in the rugby championship. I think they'll probably come third. I think New Zealand and South Africa are just still too strong for them. However, I really wouldn't be surprised if there was a win here or there against one of them, or both. In fact, against both of them, I think they can definitely sneak a victory against both sides. If they play like they did against the Lions with that intensity, nothing can really stop them.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're right when when you say when they play that intensity and they showed that intensity in the third test. I think you're like moving into Joe Smith will be leaving at the end of the rugby championship. I've just confirmed that there. Probably should have looked at that before. But yeah, Les Kiss coming in. Les Kiss has sort of had a bit of a he's been sort of in and out of played was Ulster coach a number of years ago. He's been in the Queensland Reds the last couple of years. I think he's done a couple of assistant coach jobs at international teams, if memory serves. Do you think he can? It was a bit of a strange choice for me when I looked at it, especially when you move past the rugby championship. I think you're right in terms of I think they can perhaps cause an upset when you see how they're performing against the Lions. I think if they finish third, I think they'd be fairly happy with that, especially given Argentina and them having their sort of French division playing players coming back into their sides. They'll be quite strong going into it, so I think if they finish third, they'd be quite happy. But moving on past the rugby championship, because I think the big thing for them is moving towards that World Cup, that home World Cup, with players like Joseph Swalihi, which you're hoping to sort of keep hold of, and different players like that. Do you think Les Kiss is the man to take them forward into that, or what do you think? And do you think they have the talent to be a contender at that World Cup?
Contender, probably not, because I just think the quality around them is just far superior. I mean, we've said a lot of these names already: New Zealand, France, South Africa, England. Give credit to Ireland as well. Give credit to Scotland. You've got six nations there who I think would actually beat them all, and would be the odds. I think would be more in their favour of lifting the trophy. Scotland, I don't think would actually do it, but I think they'd have a better chance than Australia. Is what I'm trying to say. But Les Kiss, I think. The career that he's had and the teams that he's coached for or been director of rugby for, it backs it up. They've not just gone for a willy-nilly kind of appointment. They've gone for someone who's got pedigree behind him. And as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was a rugby league player in his day. So I think that influence in both sides of the game will actually help him, because I know that they've had a lot of issues with kind of players going over and playing rugby league, and as that's actually a more favoured sport in Australia. So maybe he can kind of persuade players to come back and play rugby union, or kind of recruit a
Maybe
couple of
get them
others who.
into the game, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
so I think it could be a positive thing for them. But he was at Queensland Reds, obviously done a decent stint with them. London Irish, coached them for a while before they went under. I think it had something to do with Ulster.
Yes, he was our director of rugby. We weren't really too great in that period, to be honest. It wasn't one of our best. I wasn't personally. I wasn't a fan of the rugby we played during that time.
Yeah.
That's sort of where my apprehensions come from. But that was like
Yeah.
quite a number of years ago now. But yeah, I think it was a very interesting point you raised about the rugby league there and the links that he could potentially have into rugby league and sort of persuading players to sort of maybe choose union over league. And I think the Lions hopefully will have helped that sort of that progression in the rugby union game, because from what I hear in Australia, league is, yeah, you're right, it'd be the preferred sport for them. You see players like Mark, I'm going to butcher his name here, Mark Nakarawa, I think, who played for the Wallabies a couple of years ago, has moved over to the league. He's been he was a very good player in Union. He's carried it over to the league. I think they've got the talent. I do. I think they've got a lot of talent. And I think they've got some experience with boys like Skelton. It'll be interesting to see the halfbacks, which is obviously always such a key position, how they develop in that position. They've had Lola Seo for the last couple of years, who's been quite a good player for them. I wouldn't say he's one of the best tens in the world, but I think he fits what they need, which is someone who knows their system really well. And then obviously you get Tom Lina, who will have had the key experience of a Lions series and being put in that pressure cooker. But yeah, I think I fancy them a bit more than you would. I think in the Rugby World Cup, with it being a home World Cup,
Yeah.
and with a couple of their players being on the sort of younger side, you've got. I think I've seen a bit of news coming out that's potentially there'll be less restrictions on players coming back from playing in the French league to playing for Australia. So I think your Nick Skeltons and boys like that will be more free to play for Australia, and Tupou as well, who plays for Racing 92.
Well,
Um,
hopefully they do the
that will
same
be
for
a good thing.
England.
Yeah, well, yeah, fingers crossed so you can get Jack Willis back, because honestly that man is a man mountain.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of cause to be optimistic, but also, it doesn't always work out as easy as that. And I think personally, when I look to them in this rugby championship, I think they could finish. That'll be third or fourth, I think, and then you'll sort of building towards that World Cup. It'll be interesting to see how they do in the autumn. I think they'll be a decent side at their own World Cup, but I do tend to agree with you. There's better sides, and I think they'll probably they'll just maybe quarter final. I think they'll make a quarter final. I'd be
Yeah.
very disappointed if they didn't make a quarter final, of course. But I don't know if they'll have the mustard to go all the way to the final. Maybe semis if they have a big game in the quarters. But yeah, I think it looks brighter than it did a couple of years ago. I think is the moral of the story there. I'm not sure what you think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think, yeah, it's definitely in a better place now. But yeah, who knows? Life's unpredictable, so why speculate when you can just see the excitement unfold?
Yeah, and you'll actually you're working at the Women's Rugby World Cup, which is coming up this month as well. So perhaps you'll be working at
Yes.
Women's Rugby World Cup and then the Men's Rugby World Cup in 2 years' time, Dom. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I think I'll
Who
just be out of uni,
knows?
so I'll be a wee bit ambitious for me, but hopefully we'll see you there.
It's definitely something to work towards, and hey, everybody wants to go to Australia, so it
Yeah,
would be really awesome to do that.
yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And before we move on to our last section, which is talking about Louis Rees-Zammitts, we'll sort of talking about the Rugby World Cup is a good opportunity to sort of trail our next episode, episode 4 of season 3, which will be an interview with Bruce Houston, who is a Zimbabwe international rugby player, born in Northern Ireland, qualifies for Zimbabwe through his mother. So we managed to sit down with Bruce and discuss his journey to becoming a Zimbabwe international rugby player and qualifying for the Rugby World Cup. So we've got that coming up in the next episode. So I thought I'd just mention that. But yeah, that's coming up next. But last bit of news, this did happen last week, admittedly, but we've been sort of engrossed in the Lions stuff that we haven't really had a chance to properly speak on it. But Louis Rees-Zammitts has decided to return to rugby union after 18 months in the NFL, stints that he had for the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Kansas
Kansas
City
City
Chiefs.
Chief.
That's the one. My knowledge on the NFL is a little bit shady, but yeah. So, what are your thoughts on this, Dom? I think it's a huge boost to Welsh rugby, especially when you're looking for a bit of good news that way round after to build on the Japan win, and all the stuff that's going on in the background of Welsh rugby. What are your thoughts on Louis Rees-Zammitts coming back?
Yeah, I think if you needed, it could go one of two ways. I think I'm seeing it as more of like a solidity kind of point of view. They needed that someone in the back line to kind of be there be their player.
Mm.
They've had Louis, as I mentioned some of these names already, but Liam Williams was kind of one back in the day. Josh Adams, when he was in at the top of his game, was that winger who was just you were kind of scared of. But hopefully for Wales, if Louis Rees-Zammitts comes back into the squad, it should be a seamless kind of fit, um, and hopefully just kind of give them the pick me up that they need. But it could also go the other way. This guy's just spent 18 months out in USA thinking. I thought the move initially was so ridiculous because the difference between English rugby and NFL is just it's wild. I know a
Yeah.
couple of people have done it before, but
Christian Wade's done it, I think, before.
yeah, Christian
Recently.
Wade. I mean, that guy's just a bit of an anomaly, isn't he? He's made the Lions. He's played rugby union at the top level. He's played for England, then went on and played in the NFL, and now he's absolutely killing it. Obviously in the
Rugby league.
Super Rugby League.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of just it's a bit mental. But no, I think I'm hopeful for Wales that this will be, like I said, the pick me up that they need and the kind of the boost that will get them back to winning ways. But quite a fun fact, you've probably seen this as well. Louis Rees-Zammitts during his time away only missed one Welsh victory,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah,
uh,
that would be right,
and
wouldn't
that was
it?
against Japan.
Yeah. Yeah, you could see the glee with which you said that
Oh
as
yeah.
an England rugby fan. Yeah, you should, guys. You should have saw that. We bumped into, well, didn't bump into each other. We went to see you after the England Wales match, the thumping in Cardiff, and you should see just the smile on his face as he comes out of the Temple Bar in Cardiff. He's grinning from ear to ear. He's absolutely loving it. As he sports his Cardiff University rugby top right now.
Yeah,
Which side are you on, Dom? Which side are you on?
I'm an
Yeah, I think
Englishman
you're.
at heart, always will be.
Yeah, aye, that's it. You're as English as fish and chips. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Louis Rees-Zammit coming back in. You're Josh Adams just made the point there, but he's still in the Welsh squad, but he's been plagued with injuries as well as sort of obviously not having the same boys around him, and that Welsh side. It'll be good to see Louis Rees-Zammit coming back in alongside having Josh Adams there. I think that's two boys with decent international experience, which will be good, important for those other boys. Louis Rees-Zammit, in my opinion, he has a bit more stardust than Josh Adams. I think he could make
Yeah,
a bigger
100%.
difference just in sort of in moments where you need a bit of magic. I think he could if he can come back and sort of pick up where he left off. He's talked about. I've seen in an interview. He's talked about how much he's learned in terms of training with NFL athletes and sort of skills that he's developed on. He didn't really explain further than that, but it'd be sort of interesting to see what he has learned from the NFL and training out there with those boys and skills he's developed. I think for Wales, it's a development process, and Louis Rees-Zammit coming in as a winger, as you mentioned earlier with Josh Adams slash fullback, the impact that he'll be able to have on that team is probably not as big as if you're welcoming back like a former great fly half. You sort of like a Dan Bigger, for example. Say Dan Bigger went
Yeah.
off and played in the NFL. I would have made a bigger sort of impact coup to come back. But I think it's still good for Welsh rugby all the same. Sort of, he said his motivations to sort of come back to the game were to play for Wales. That was sort of his main one. Now, do you think he will play in his rugby in Wales? Where do you think he's going to move to?
I've seen debates about this. Obviously,
Yeah,
Racing love a big money move. They love
yeah.
kind of
And they're
attracting
selling.
players in.
They're getting Henry Arundel is moving from Racing to Bath, so that frees up a space for them actually.
It does, yeah. So it could be, it's an obvious move if you're a Racing kind of supporter or whatever. Um, does he go to his? Does he go home? Does he go play for the Blues? Maybe Josh Adams kind of taking his foot off the pedal the last few years, so maybe he can slot into that spot. Does he go back to his home team of Gloucester? Does he go a bit bigger, set his ambitions a bit higher, and go for a bigger English or French Prem team? Honestly, I've got no idea. I think Racing's probably the one that makes most sense.
Hmm.
I I could see, Gloucester have lost a few players. They've lost Wade, they've lost Anti Carreras. So, they've lost a couple of good players in the backfield. So it could be that he wants to go home and do it at King's. No, they don't play the King's Home. What am I thinking? What's their ground called?
Cardiff Blues, you're talking?
No,
Or no?
Gloucester's.
Oh no, it's Kingsholm. Kingsholm, you're right.
I was right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you might want to go back and return to King's Home. But we don't know. It's all speculation at this point, and but I'm excited to see where he chooses, whether he
Yeah.
goes because he's played more than 30 caps. He doesn't have to go to Wales, does he?
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He can go wherever he likes, which is, I suppose, is the good thing for him. We've got another option here. He mentioned obviously a lot of the URC, the English Prem, the French, obviously the French Pro 14 or yeah, that's right. That's
Top
right.
14.
Top 14, Pro 14. That's the old URC. Yeah, the top 14. But we've got this is another bit of rugby news, which has sort of been boiling the last couple of weeks. It's been quite big news. Mike Tyndall has been sort of at the head of this. R360, which is a proposal for a new rugby league which will be played all across the world, which will bring together a number of teams, I think 6 or 7, and it'll just be they'll be recruiting players from around the world, a bit like if any of you have watched football before, it would be like the Super League, to be honest, where you sort of have these new, or well, I suppose that would have been teams that were established in the Super League, but it'd be sort of like a rugby Super League, basically, where you sort of have all these new teams. They would play out a season from like September to December. It was. I think it's been touted that Mike Tyndall and a couple of people that are behind R360 have been looking at him, and Joseph Swally and a number of others. Do you think that's something they could possibly do, or do you think that's sort of just a lot of paper talk?
I think if you're wanting a player who, I mentioned this about Henry Pollock last week, is that I think he was only kind of picked as a bit of a publicity stunt. And I think if you're wanting to attract a certain audience, i.e. Americans, he's a great pick because he's somewhat known over there now. He'll have built a name for himself. So yeah, why not? I think it's very doable to get someone like him in to kind of, especially for the ladies, they love a little pretty boy in the rugby world. So
He's
to
very well
attract
groomed.
someone.
He's very well groomed, to be fair.
Yeah, him and Sue Lee, they're both handsome chaps, so I'm sure there'd be an increased demographic watching that if it came about. But I think
A bit like the increase in the ladies' demographic and watching Cardiff Uni Rugby fours when you were playing, Dom, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, when I wasn't injured or banned, that was definitely it was definitely increased spectatorships, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but no, let's we'll see how he gets on in the first few games for Wales. But I did notice the other day that Wales posted on their Instagram they were promoting the Autumn Nations games, and the first post was his chip and chase try against Fiji, I believe.
Yeah.
They're already expecting him to walk straight into that team. So
Absolutely. I don't think they're. I think they're almost like saying, "Oh, come and see Louis Rees-Zammitts play for Wales." Yeah,
yeah,
I think if he is the play, if he comes back, you never know like what sort of how he comes back, but you sort of presume that if he comes back anywhere near the player that he does, he probably walks into that Wales side. Yeah, I
yeah,
think we can talk about the R360 thing. Another, I think that's a whole podcast in itself. That's a whole deep dive that we're gonna need to do. It's sort of been something that's sort of been behind the surface when we've been talking about the Lions stuff. We've been focused on it. But yeah, I think you're right. He'd be a huge coup for that perspective initiative league. If you were to hazard a guess, I'll go first. If you were to hazard a guess, where he's gonna go, like if you were to guess, it would be Racing 92. Would you say?
I think Racing or Gloucester, they're
Mm,
my top
yeah.
picks.
I think
But
yeah, I think I tend to agree with you on Racing because I don't think the Welsh present like they're trying to cut. They're there's talks about cutting 2 Welsh sides. I don't see how they would have the money for Louis Rees-Zammitts coming off the stock that he's coming off after being in the NFL and the player that he is, British and Irish Lion. I don't think the Welsh side's had enough money for it. I think he could potentially go back to Gloucester with Carreras leaving and Wade leaving and getting a couple others as well. He could potentially go back in there, but I think he probably strikes me as a guy that maybe wants a new challenge in rugby union, like a challenge elsewhere. So I actually think that shout of Racing 92 could potentially be an exclusive almost prediction scoop from you, Dom. To be honest, I think that could be spot on. I think he will go to the French league. Obviously, we don't have any, as much as we'd love to say we have inside sources. We do not have inside sources, but yeah, I think that could be a good shout for him. But yeah, it's good. It's great to see him back in the game. All the same, I think Welsh rugby will be stronger for it. Just as we are finishing off on our episode 3 of the Ruck and Roll Show, we thank you for watching the last couple of episodes and tuning into all our Lions chat. We've been absolutely Lions mad the last couple of times. We'll finish on a little interesting one. If you could rate this British and Irish Lions Test series in the professional era, whereabouts would you put it? Would you put it top 3, top 5? Where would you put it in terms of the series? So just for context, we've got 97, we've got number 1, 2001, 2005, 2009, 2013, 2017, 2021, 2025. So that's 8 series. Where would you put it?
Off the top of my head, tough one. I'd say sixth, fifth or
6th.
sixth, fifth or
Wow.
sixth.
Okay.
I
Interesting.
think there's definitely been.
What do you put below it out of curiosity? 2005 was
Oh,
obviously the worst one by a long
yeah,
mile. It was
yeah.
awful from what I've
The one
heard.
that yeah, from the one that Clive Woodward took charge of was pretty abysmal by all accounts.
Yeah.
Um, thing is, I'm not. You know, the game's changed, players have changed, the way that rugby's played, and I can't say I'm more in tune of what the earlier ones were like. Um, but I don't know. I think just kind of based off what I'd put above it is what I'm going off, is why I've put it like fifth or sixth. So I guess I could work out from that what would be below it. But I think you look at the ones that are ahead of it. I think maybe 2021 would definitely be one of those that's below it.
Mm.
I don't think that was a great squad at all. There were some good players, but I think there's definitely. I think this one was definitely better, especially because they secured a win. But you look at teams like get the right years now: 2013, 2009, 2017 were all 3 great years successively that were just
Yeah.
like it was like whoa, like really good players on display. So yeah, they definitely all be above this one.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, I actually I agree with I agree. Yeah, I think it was. I think because they won it, I think it would be. I'd rank it higher than 2009 in terms of obviously winning it, and I think the media hype around it as well, and
Mm.
sort of the way the game's grown, I probably think it's overall better. But yeah, you probably. I don't know. I think I'd probably put it third. I think I'd probably 2013 first, winning the Test series, and then obviously had all the sort of the media attention around it and how big the tour was for the British and Irish Lions after losing 3 tours on the bounce.
Yeah.
And then I'd actually put 2017 in below that. I really enjoyed the 2017 test. I think that was cracking, even though it finished in a draw. And then yeah, I
Mm.
put 2025 third. Absolutely cracking term. We've had an absolute blast. Talking about it. But thanks for coming on again, Dom. Co-hosting again. It's been an absolute.
Thank
We've
you.
talked a lot longer than we were expecting to.
Yeah.
We thought with Luke not being on, we might cut it down by a bit. We've actually gone over, so maybe we're the talkers, and
Maybe we're the problem.
Luke, maybe no. Well, Luke's not. He's not a problem, but he's yeah. He's the biggest talker out of the three of us, I
He
think.
is.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, he'll be proud that we've kept it going for an hour and 40 minutes there. To be fair,
Yeah, absolutely.
wherever he's watching, we'll put his little clip in at the end, his thoughts on the Lion series. But thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Dom. That was episode 3 of season 3 of the Rock and Roll Show. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
Hi boys, I'm sorry I can't make the recording. I thought what a Lions test that was. That was incredible. I mean, I was proven right. Australia did win 2-1 series. I did call it. Nick White, what an unbelievable game he had. Man of the match performance. Will Skelton was up there as well. All round excellent performance, I thought, from the Wallabies. The Lions looked a bit shaky. Discipline was poor. Sheehan was very, very lucky not to be red carded for his clear out on Tom Liner, which was really sad because I thought Tom Liner was having a good series until he had that HI incident. All round, I thought that was a thoroughly enjoying Lions series, and I can't wait to see what you guys say next time. Really, really sorry I can't make the recording because I'm away. But I want to hear what you guys have to say about the Lions tour, and I'm so excited for what this future brings, because we have seen some standout players from the Lions team, but also the Australians are building back and going into the Rugby Championship. Who can they topple? Can they beat the All Blacks? Can they beat the Springboks? It's going to be an amazing one. Enjoy it, boys.